Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I actually just recorded this very video that I'm going to be talking about right now, but I didn't really like the way it came out, so I'm just going to re-record it all together because I want to make sure I do this right because I think this is just such an important video to talk about. I just want to get it right, okay? And I want to make sure this is as concise and understandable as I can possibly get it, okay? And so in today's video, you might have already read the title, but I'm going to be tackling the idea of suffering and why suffering is a choice. Why is it so addictive? How can we stop suffering? And also what suffering really even is to begin with. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Before we start, just want to let you know, everything I teach you is my own interpretation. And also I do have coaching available. So if that is something that you want to do, it's something you're looking into, I do have options for that. So you can definitely check that out. Text memberships definitely work the best because I'm able to explain things in the best way through text anyway. So, that is probably the best option you have. But putting that to the side, let me first talk about what suffering even is. Okay. And actually, before that, let me talk about why suffering exists anyway. All right. So, just let me get my notes up really quickly. Sorry about that. Because this is a pretty important video, so I don't want to fuck it up. So I wrote notes. So bear with me just for a second. Okay. So why suffering even exists? Suffering is what happens when the self forgets the oneness that it is. So when we forget that we are God, when we forget that we are the operant power, that we are one with the universe and one with everything there is in this world, we then suffer. Because when we don't identify with God, when we don't identify with what we are as the operant power, then we're lacking, right? Then we're lacking the initial source, the source that is love. We're lacking it, right? We don't have that. So then what happens? We suffer, okay? So at a fundamental level, right, for every human, this is true for everything that exists on earth, animals, humans, any living creature, right? Nothing is missing. And we are not separate from love. We are not separate from being. We are not separate from all of the things that we want in this life, that we want to experience, being chosen, loved, and committed to, being understood and seen. All of these things are not separate from us. They already exist within us, through us, as us. Okay? Understand that first and foremost. But your entire life, you are led to believe that these things are separate, that we have to do things in this external world to even experience it here in the now, in the 3D, that we have to attain it, right? But suffering, excuse me, does not exist. It does not exist technically in the now moment. It's always happening either in the past or it's always happening in a perceived future. So what do I mean by this, right? So right now, let's give the example, right, that you're suffering. Could be about anything, really, but you are pondering something. You're thinking about something or you're remembering something, either from the past or you're worried over an outcome that could happen in the future, right? You do this, when you do this, you start to kind of fall into fear, right? Whether it be a remembering something in the past, you don't want things to go out the way they did in the past. So then you're worrying about the past, constantly fearing the past, and then now you're suffering in the past. But in the very present moment, you're now living in the past, right? In the same sense, it's the anticipation of the future that we're also afraid of. We're afraid of what can happen in the future. We're afraid that in the future, something will come and will ruin what we have. Or in some sort of way, things are not going to work out, right? And so this is also how we suffer in the perceived future. And so it doesn't exist right now, but we're experiencing it right now because, well, we're thinking about the future or we're thinking about the past. So it's not necessarily happening right now in this very present moment. You're sitting here on YouTube watching this video. You might have something playing in the background, or you might have this video playing in the background as you're doing something else. Or you might be just watching this video as you're driving to work or whatever it may be. In this very present moment, you're not suffering. But suffering is a choice. And it also is a state of identity, right? It is not just the emotions you feel, but it is the identity you become when you start to identify with these things. So this also happens when we start to misinterpret, right? So when we believe that love or stability or acceptance is something that we need to gain, or it is something that needs to be protected, right? Or something that, excuse me, that needs to be maintained, right? Sorry about that. My throat is going crazy. But so when we start to misinterpret these things, when we believe that it is something that is lost, is when we also start to suffer, because we believe that we have love right now, but then it can be lost. So what do I have to do? What do I have to do to keep it consistently going in my life? What do I have to do to not suffer? And then we're so worried about not suffering that we end up suffering anyway, because we're thinking about how to not suffer, right? Suffering is the experience that we experience when we are being lack. And then what we believe is naturally ours, by nature of being one with everything, it can be lost. So, it just perpetuates, and then it becomes into this greater being that you just are identifying with all the time. And to that point, as to why suffering is so addictive, right? This is not something you really hear a lot of people talk about, at least in manifestation communities. But I guess I'm not so much of a manifestation creator anymore, more so creating videos on my own beliefs, which are mainly considered manifestation, whatever. I'm getting sidetracked. But so why suffering becomes addictive, right? Because love is the closest thing that the mind can come up with when we're not identifying with love, right? And I want you to really think about that, okay? So when the mind cannot remember what it's like to be loved, it will try to do that when you are suffering, or before you're even suffering, right? When you're still pondering these thoughts and worrying and fearing, it's going to start to snowball, right? And then it's going to get you to identify with that lack, right? And so when love is forgotten, when love feels like it's not accessible, it creates this pseudo love that I call it, right? I call it like a pseudo love, right? Because it's a counterfeit. It's a reject. It's a fake version of love, right? It becomes addictive because it is like two sides of a coin, right? If love is the heads, then suffering is the tails, right? So they feel very much similar, but one feels like love, but contorted and misconstrued in a way. But it still has like the similar essence that love has, which is why so many people are addicted to suffering in the first place. Because it has the intensity that you feel when you're loved. It gives you the identity that you have when you're loved, right? It gives you this meaning to yourself, to your worth and your identity, the same way you would have meaning and identity when you're loved. And it also gives you this sense of stability, but rather a lack of stability instead, right? So it's everything love does, but flipped in a way, right? But it still kind of feels like love. And then the ego prefers this love because this pain is more easily accessible than love is, because perceived emptiness feels more real than wholeness of everything. And so the identity clings to this. It clings to the identity of lack. And then you're continuously lacking. And then you're choosing lack over abundance, even if abundance is in your life, because lack feels like love. And because it feels like love, you believe it is love in a very twisted sense. And then because it feels like love, you choose to lack, and you choose to be the victim in situations and scenarios, even when you have the option to not. And then it perpetuates the cycle. And then you're going to continue to experience more circumstances where you suffer, right? And again, like, suffering belongs to the identity of a victim, right? You create this narrative in every situation that you are suffering, that you are the victim. And throughout this, something you guys have to keep in mind is the role of identification throughout all of this, right? Suffering is not just because it feels like pain. It's because we're identifying with pain. And when you identify with pain, and like I said, the pain feels good because it feels similar to love. And before I get to that topic, why do you want to feel love in the first place, right? Because the feeling of love is the closest feeling that we can get to wholeness, of oneness of everything, right? It is the closest feeling that we can get to God, to universe. So this is what we strive for. And when that isn't available to us, the next best thing, the false best thing that feels like love, lack. And so we identify with that. We identify with pain. And then we don't really want to go through the motions of healing. We don't want to go through the motions of peace or resolution because think about it. If you've been a victim for a long time, healing feels like a completely new shift in your life. It's going to feel so foreign. It's going to feel so different. It's going to feel like something you haven't done before. And human beings have in our nature are afraid of change, right? We're afraid of choosing something new. And this is why healing can be scary. I say healing briefly, but identification becomes scary with something better because you're afraid to choose something new. And then peace feels like something that's threatening because, well, I've never felt this. I've only had this way my entire life. I don't know what peace is. It's scary because I think I can lose it. It feels unnatural because nothing is happening. It feels unnatural because for once I feel not like shit. So what is up with that, right? Normally I'm used to feeling like shit, right? And then resolution becomes like erasure because you're practically letting go of an identity. You're choosing a new identity. And what that does is it kills off the old one. And essentially we're afraid of killing off the ego, or the old ego. And so because of these things, it becomes really hard to let go, right? Let go of the suffering. And because of this, you don't care for the circumstances to change because suffering itself supplies the meaning in your life. Suffering gives you a meaning in your life, even if it's not even a good one. This is why people identify with victim mentality so much, because being a victim gives them meaning in their life in the weirdest ways, right? You will find a way to be a victim in everything, right? If you are somebody who used to be this way or you're this way right now, think about it. Look for reasons in your own life and look at how you made yourself a victim in situations, then things played out to where you were the victim. You chose that, right? Whether you were conscious of it or not, you chose to be the victim. And that's something that first you have to understand, but also it's not exactly your fault. But, it's something that needs to be said. And then again, the ego will choose suffering over the freedom of choice to avoid losing its identity. Because at the end of the day, choosing a new identity can be a fearful thing when you don't know what comes next. But the truth is we do know what comes next because we are love. We are it. What else is there? We know it. It's returning to self. And so to kind of just summarize just a little bit what I was saying, right? Suffering is like the distorted attempt to experiencing oneness when we can't experience it. So let's just get that there. It's wanting the idea of being one or wanting whatever it is you desire without actually being that. It's like you're cutting the last step off of actually receiving anything in your life because it feels better to not have it. It's weird. So yeah, I mean, these are all just smaller things that I wanted to say because again, it's kind of important. Suffering provides like a false sense of intimacy through separation, right? This is also another thing to mention because when you're suffering, it gives you a sense of intimacy within yourself, right? Not with other people, but with self. And ultimately, again, like I said, it's like the flip side of love. So when you have unity with self, that is unity with oneness. But this is like the flip of that. So when you're unifying with the lack, then you are lack. If that makes sense. I just wanted to throw that out there. Hopefully that made sense, right? If you need any clarification, I can clarify that in the comments or make another video or whatever. But yeah, that is just one thing to kind of point out there. And kind of like how we can resolve suffering, right? Suffering does not stop through suppression or avoiding it, right? It comes through acceptance and like disidentification. Accept and understand that you are being this identity and then stop identifying with it, right? Being aware in the present moment allows you to pull the roots out of suffering because when you're present and your mind starts to wander, you are aware of it. This is what awareness does. Awareness protects you from falsely relying on the ego when you don't need to. And so the ways we can do this is there are multiple ways we can experience love within us, right? It's just a matter of remembering the love that exists within you. You can claim it, you can affirm it, you can visualize it, you can, whatever you feel that makes you feel loved, happy, whatever makes you feel one, you do that, right? Because that is ultimately what is going to bring that love back to you. to get you to stop suffering, to choose this new identity. Because by you choosing love, you are choosing the real you. You are choosing oneness. And so over time, you are going to continuously choose to not suffer. Because, first of all, you're aware that your mind was addicted to it and that now you don't want to be. And so you'll take the cautionary steps and the measures to stop suffering altogether. And this is all to say that you will still feel, you'll still feel everything. You can feel sad, you can feel anything, but you understand that you are not the feeling and that you're merely observing the suffering, not actually being it. So once you start observing it and stop being it, you live your life in a much more peaceful way. You can let that wash over you without becoming it, right? Love is not just an imitation of being God or being all there is. It's remembering that you're all there is, right? It's not the person, it's not the money or the job or anything that brings you love or happiness. It's the remembrance of the things that are true within you, right? Being in a relationship and having love is just unity. It's reminding you of the unity of oneness that you are. Stability, right? Stability is just remaining in the identity of having everything, right? And, these things, you have to just remember them, right? By claiming them, you're remembering them. By identifying and being it internally, you are becoming it. You will become it externally, right? So choose remembrance over suffering every single time, and then eventually your circumstances outside will change, and then the reality will start to reflect that change. And so this isn't to say this is an easy process, but when you start, be intentful with it and start to choose the new you over the old you. And so hopefully this video made sense. I know it was kind of all over the place and there was a lot to talk about, maybe a lot to take in. But ultimately, I want you guys to stop identifying with suffering if you've been doing that. And if you have been, hopefully this video helped you out. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time.